This is the toughest chins that were eventually broken. Let's get started. Number 5, Usman KOs Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal needs no introduction. A combat sports legend from street fighting in Miami to holding the record for the fastest knockout in UFC history. He's known as Gamebred because that's exactly what he is. And that's exactly what he was back in 2020 when he faced Kamaru Usman for the UFC Welterweight Championship of the World. Masvidal would take the fight on less than a week notice and go in there to take the champ to all 5 rounds. He'd lose by decision, unanimous, but his confidence was unwavering and he'd demand a rematch, this time with a full training camp. In 2021, he would not only get his rematch, but it would take place in front of his home state of Florida. And on this night, Usman would leave no doubt. Perhaps underestimating Kamaru's power, Masvidal left the window open, and that's when the champ would land a wild overhand right, knocking out Gamebred's lights. It was the first time Jorge Masvidal was stopped in the UFC, and the last time he'd ever challenged for the title. Number 4. It's one of the most shocking comebacks in UFC history, over one of the most dominant champions of all time. I turned off the first fight between Kamaru Usman and Leon Edwards with 2 minutes left. I had to work the next day and had just watched the champion Usman dominate the British challenger for over 20 minutes. What I'd miss would be one of the most memorable finishes to a title fight ever. Coming off one of the most inspirational corner speeches of all time, the man known as Rocky would need a knockout to take home the belt.
Stop feeling sorry for your fucking self. Well, come on then. What's wrong with you? You're too fucking down. You gotta pull the shit out of the fire.
Approaching a minute left in the fight, it looked like he'd also need a miracle. Well, that's when lightning struck in the form of a perfectly timed head kick that would crumble the champion. It would be called the greatest head kick KO in UFC history. Thousands all over the world were left shocked. In the blink of an eye, the dominant run of the Nigerian Nightmare had come to an end. At no time in his career in the UFC had we seen Kamaru Usman lose, let alone be hurt by a punch. To prove it was no fluke, Usman and Edwards would rematch a year later, with Edwards this time picking up a more convincing 5-round unanimous decision. Number 3. In his prime, Tony Ferguson was arguably the best lightweight in the world. From 2013 to 2019, Ferguson held rank in the 155-pound division with a staggering 12 straight victories, in that time becoming the interim champion of the world. But an opportunity to solidify his championship would elude him, and eventually El Cucuy would age. Ferguson's win streak would eventually end by knockout to Justin Gaethje at UFC 249, but it was his loss 2 years later that had many calling for the Mexican legend to hang up the gloves. Now Ferguson would have his moment dropping Chandler in round 1, but it was what happened in round 2 that people remember, because Michael Chandler threw a front head kick, landing and sending Ferguson's chin to the ceiling. It's a knockout that has been replayed thousands and thousands of times and effectively has been turned into a meme online. A knockout like that changes careers. Ferguson on Twitter even said, "It knocked me out for a long time. It was a scary feeling not remembering anything from the start of the second round until I got into the ambulance." Despite fans' pleas for him to retire after this fight, Ferguson has continued to compete, losing 3 more matches after this. He is currently on a 7-fight losing streak. Number 2. The next moment on our list comes from the UFC's middleweight division. When Israel Adesanya faced Alex Poatan Pereira in 2023, it was the 4th time the pair faced off against each other in competition, the 2nd time with the UFC. Each time beforehand, it would be the Brazilian ending up with his hand raised and his son dancing in the face of the stylebender. So on the night of UFC 287, during their rematch for the UFC middleweight championship, many were betting on Poatan. Instead, it would be the champion who would be rendered unconscious. A final minute flurry in round 2 would send him down and out, his first ever KO loss. Since then, Adesanya and Pereira have taunted each other about a third match inside the octagon. The fight has never materialized. The Adesanya loss has proven to be a minor bump in the career of Pereira. Following his loss, he'd move up to light heavyweight, where he'd win gold just after 2 fights. His run of winning championships in 2 weight classes, while only having 7 fights inside the octagon, is one of the most impressive things seen to this day. Say what you want about Francis Ngannou, the man is an inspiration. From his very humble beginnings to the UFC Heavyweight Championship of the world, the Predator made a career out of turning out lights. That's why when he entered the boxing world, many gave the so-called baddest man on the planet a puncher's chance. A stellar showing against Tyson Fury in 2024 would shock the world. Ngannou would lose, but he would threaten even dropping the Gypsy King in the second round. But it was his second match against Britain's Anthony Joshua where fortunes changed for Ngannou. The normally humble, soft-spoken Nigeria came into the match unusually confident. Some might say brash. What would happen would be a humbling experience to say the least. Joshua dominated the bout, knocking down Ngannou in the first round before sealing the deal with 2 knockdowns in the second. It would be the fight's third knockdown though, the knockout, that would really have people talking. An Anthony Joshua right hand that left the 6'4", 250-pound Ngannou flat. The loss has changed perspectives, and not just for Ngannou's critics. Following the knockout, even some MMA experts have suggested Ngannou could lose to Joshua in an MMA fight. Now, I won't go that far, but for this video, Ngannou hasn't announced any new plans for a future fight. We're still weeks removed from the Joshua loss, so the jury is still out on how the big man's chin will hold up, especially now he's 37 years old.
Every time I wake up, shit feel the same. Got a million thoughts and they weighing on my brain. Sipping on my favorite liquor just to ease the pain, cause I feel like I'm crazy and desperate need to change. Making plans to move and talking state to state. Talking pounds of haze, medical high grade. Look how my eyes stay, what more can I say? How dare a nigga tell me that this rap won't work?